evening. Welcome to the True Intimacy Seminar. We're so glad you're here. We're looking forward to a great night, and we've got a lot ahead of us. You've heard the saying, what a difference a day makes. Well, we're going to be together for about 24 hours. We're going to have quite a few hours of teaching, and by tomorrow afternoon, we're believing that there's going to be some significant changes in all of our hearts. We know that some of you have come with great marriages, and all you're wanting to do is enhance that and to make it better. We know also, because of the history that we've had in doing these conferences across the country, that there are many of you here that are at the end of your rope. Some of you are wondering, what will you do next? Will this weekend somehow make things better? Well, we're praying that that will be exactly the case. Whatever your situation, we're believing that God is going to give you a new beginning and a fresh start, and you're going to be able to discover some things that you've never known before. We hope that this weekend is refreshing, and for some of you it will be restoring. One of our taglines in our ministry and for this conference is, we like to say, not just another marriage conference. Now, we don't say that pridefully. It's not meant to be that we think we're better than other marriage conferences, because we know that's not the case. What we do know is that we've had many people talk to us after they've been a part of our True Intimacy Conference, and they've told us that it is very unique, and it has done something in them that some of the others that tend to be somewhat surfacey in some ways, more humorous, more energetic that way, but we really believe that God wants to go deep into our hearts. And so we want to be different in that regard. We want to make sure that we are not just dealing with the external matters, but we want to go to the heart of the matter. We want to find out what it is that's going on inside, and that's going to take an individual response to God, to listen to what God's saying to you. And if you'll come tonight with an open heart, we believe very, very much that God is going to give you what you've come here for tonight. Statistics tell us that 2/3 to 3/4 of the population will experience some type of significant failure throughout the course of their marriage. Linda and I certainly experienced those kinds of failures. We're going to talk about some of those ambushes that come into our lives and marriages tonight. We're going to discover on this journey that we're on some things that you've perhaps only recognized but never stopped to think about. We're going to take you on a very unique journey. In your workbooks, you'll notice that we're going to begin tonight in what we call the island of me. We're going to discover the power, the destructive power of self-centeredness. Linda and I have discovered that one of the most destructive factors in marriage is what we have come to identify as self-centeredness. And if we can identify that in our own hearts and lives, I believe that it'll make a big difference in improving our relationship with our spouse, our relationship with our children, and with God. And so we believe that it'll be very cross-cultural for you. It's not just going to be for your marriage, but it's going to be with your other intimate relationships, and particularly with God. Tomorrow morning, we're going to pick up that journey in another place, and we're going to take you to what we call the universe of we. That's where we're going to help you discover what we call other-centeredness. That's just another word for Christ-likeness. We're going to help you find out what it means to really give your life and lay it down for another, and to prove that you can do that for the one that God gave you. And then finally, tomorrow afternoon, we're going to end in what we call the Garden of Three. We're going to really discover what we call true intimacy, and understand that intimacy was something that God initiated and designed in the garden. We're going to go back to the Garden of Eden. We're going to find out what was going on with Adam and Eve, and we're going to find those applications to our own lives. We're going to answer the question, is it possible for us to have restored to us what was lost originally in the garden? And we believe that through Jesus Christ, that is exactly what God has delivered to us. And so we believe that you can have a little piece of heaven right here on earth. And if you're not enjoying that and experiencing that, then our prayer for you is that your hearts will be open and desire and risk once again that it's possible to have what you thought was lost. So we've got a fun journey ahead of us, and we hope that you'll enjoy where we're going to go. Our goal for this conference is very simple. Our goal is that you leave here with a deeper, stronger love for your mate. How many of you are open to letting that happen? Let me see your hands. Amen. That's a pretty simple goal. And it's a goal that we believe is attainable as we open our hearts and let God speak to us and show us where we may have failed. It's going to take humility. It's going to take a humble heart that says, yes, I want God to give that to me. Everyone has a story. Linda and I are going to share a little bit of our story tonight. We're going to begin by telling you some of the things that we've recognized not only in our own lives, but in the lives of many that we have counseled and been able to come alongside of to see their marriages refreshed and restored on a personal basis. We'll be sharing our personal story. We'll be telling you some stories about others, maybe individuals and couples that you'll be able to relate to. Our story begins back in Minneapolis. Well, actually in Dayton, Ohio, where we just said we moved to. We got married. I married my childhood sweetheart. I met her at church camp. That's a good place to meet your spouse, I'll tell you that. We met at church camp, and we were pretty young, actually. And it was love at first sight for me. Now, I don't tell that to very many young couples. I'm not going to let them think that that's really possible unless it ends up happening. But it happened. I fell in love with this beautiful redhead at the concession stand at camp that night. And the rest was history. 7 years to the day from the day that we met, 7 years exactly later, we got married in Dayton, Ohio. And 6 weeks after that, we jumped in our Gremlin, our yellow Gremlin, bright yellow Gremlin, and took off for Minneapolis, Minnesota to North Central University to go to Bible college. Now, the saddest part about that story about jumping in that Gremlin is the fact that I sold a 1971 British Racing Green T-top Corvette. Because I wanted to be practical. After all, I was a married man now, and we were going to be going to Minneapolis and starting our lives and starting our home. And so I sold that Corvette. Matter of fact, one of my friends here tonight came up and asked me if we've gotten that Corvette yet. I haven't, Chris, but I'm believing for it. Will you all believe with me for that? We're believing for that Corvette someday, but we sold that Corvette and bought the yellow Gremlin and took off to Minnesota, and the rest was history. Well, that family that we knew was going to be started someday happened a little faster than we were prepared for. And it was only about a year later, right before my second year of college in September, Linda gave birth to our firstborn son, Joshua. Well, Joshua was a strong, very strong-willed little boy, and he had colic, and here we are living in this apartment, two-bedroom apartment. I was managing the apartment to get free rent, and she was working full-time. I was going to school full-time and working part-time, and here comes this unexpected little bundle of joy named Joshua. And every night, he would scream in the middle of the night, could not get back to sleep. And what would one of us have to do? What would we have to do?
Put him in the yellow Gremlin and drive around until he fell asleep.
Isn't that fun? How many of you ever done anything like that? You've all got the same stories, don't you? Drive around Minneapolis until Josh fell back asleep again, then try to take him in the car seat up to the second floor without waking him up and dumping him into his crib, hoping he'll stay asleep, only to get up a few hours later to start it all over again. Well, that was just the beginning of realizing that there were many things that were working against us. Many things that were attempting to tear away our affections for each other and for God. We soon discovered that we are ambushed at every turn. We've had our own ambushes. We're going to share some of those things that impacted our marriage and our home. Not that they are necessarily unique or that they are something that everybody has to relate to. But what we do know is that all of you have been through something. I don't know if you're aware of it, but Paul teaches in 1 Corinthians that those who choose to marry will have troubles. They never told you that in premarital counseling, did they? If you choose to marry, Paul says, you will have troubles. Well, we know that all of you at some level have had troubles in your marriage. You've tried to manage them the best you can. You've done everything you know how to do. But what we know is that all of us have been ambushed. Every one of us deals with all kinds of stresses and pressures that can overwhelm marriage. Things like no money. Things like loss of job, illnesses, serious things that happen to us that we wish didn't happen, but God uses them to cause us to be conformed into the image of Christ. And our goal is to glorify Him in our own personal lives and, yes, in our marriage. I believe I'm going to stand before God someday. There's no biblical reference for this, but I believe that as I am standing before God in the judgment, He's going to look at me one day and say, "What'd you do with that woman I gave you?" And I want to be able to stand before Him and know that this beautiful woman that I married when we were just young teenagers, that we were going to be able to reflect more of Christ when we stand before Him than we did when we first got married. And that is my goal, that is my responsibility, as it is Linda's, to do the same in me. And so these ambushes that all of us go through, we want to make sure that we address them. Many times we think that often it's just us not being aware of them, not recognizing them, not identifying them. We just put it on autopilot, do it what we got to do to make it, and oftentimes we find ourselves not doing so well. We believe that if a couple could just sit down and see how much stress is being imposed on them by all of these factors, the battle is half over. And so tonight, as we look at some of these factors, some of these ambushes, we want you to reflect on your own lives. Consider what you've been through, what you're going through right now. How is that affecting your intimacy with your spouse, with God, and your relationship with your children, if you have children? And the sooner we get real about this, get honest with ourselves about what is really working against us, that we really do have an enemy of marriage. How many of you know it's not the one you're sitting next to? Some of you might be thinking that the real enemy of marriage is the one you married. I'm here to tell you that that's not the truth. There is a very real enemy of marriage, and his name is Satan. And we are here to expose that tonight and to cause you to be able to see some things perhaps that you've never seen before. Turn with me in your workbooks to page 3. We're going to begin session 1. What are some of the things that ambush love and tear away your affections for God and your spouse? Well, the first thing that I think all of us can relate to, and it's not anything that is necessarily profound, but the first thing that we've discovered that everybody deals with is everyday pressures. Anybody got some everyday pressures out there? I'm sure that you all have those same kind of pressures that all of us deal with. Now, I'll tell you what, having moved to the East Coast and being in the heart of the country there in Ohio, we've discovered very quickly that it's a lot simpler there. Those of you that are here on the West Coast in California, the stresses of just traffic are beyond what you really can appreciate until you get out of it and see the difference. Since we moved back there a few months ago, I haven't had any stress from driving. I was here one day, and I was a basket case in 24 hours. So those stresses, although they have nothing to do with marriage, they affect our marriage in ways that perhaps we're not even really aware of. So we want to help you see some of that. Everyday pressures are certainly there, and we need to identify them and recognize them. Dr. Tim Clinton, in his book, Before a Bad Goodbye, says this: "Who today isn't stressed out? One definition of stress is a state which arises from an actual or perceived imbalance between demand and capability. In short, you've got to do something and you don't know how, or you don't have the tools, or you don't have the time. On the average, 6 out of 10 Americans report feeling great stress at least once a week." And I think I'd like to meet the one who says he doesn't have great stress at least once a week, because I'm not sure I'm going to believe them, and you probably won't either. And my guess is that if I had you raise your hand, all of you would admit to the fact that you've had at least one single issue that would be considered great stress in your life this week. What we don't often recognize is how that stress is affecting our relationships, particularly the most intimate of relationships, that which with our spouse. So we want to just identify some of these ambushes, these stresses, these things that are affecting your marriage and help you to at least look at them tonight.
The second ambush that we want to identify tonight is listed in your book as unrealistic expectations. Unrealistic expectations. Oftentimes we go into marriage with expectations not only of our spouse, but of ourselves that are very much so unrealistic. A lot of times we continue in those same expectations even though we should learn because we've been disappointed time and time after again, but somehow we set ourselves up because we really believe that we deserve or it should be a certain way. The book there lists some of the typical common expectations that a lot of couples enter into marriage with, that of marriage will complete me, my spouse won't hurt me, life will surely be easy now, or now I can get the attention that I've always longed for. All you need is love. That's another common one. Young couples that don't have all the pieces fit together, definitely don't have the money on paper. It doesn't even look good for them, but all we need is love. That's all. It's going to all work out. And we have these expectations that once the wedding is over, that everything is going to be just perfect. For me, one of the expectations that I actually wrote into our wedding vows. Some of you might have written your own wedding vows, and I had time to do that, and it was really fun, and I gathered all these different ceremonies and cut and pasted. But one of the things that I chose to have Tim vow to me, you like how that works? Read like this. He vowed that he would do nothing to cause my brow to furrow or for a tear to stain my cheek. And that sounded so poetic and so romantic. And I loved him to say that, and he didn't question it at the time.
I didn't even know what brow to furrow meant.
But you can only guess that it was just a matter of time until something happened that caused a tear to stain my cheek. And I was so taken back that was caused by Tim. Call me naive, maybe you went into your marriage with different expectations, but I did not think we would actually hurt each other. We were so in love. This was what we had waited for. All our teenage lives was to be able to get married and start a home and a family. And for us to do or not do something that caused the other one to be hurt, I just wasn't prepared for that. Well, you can understand, and you can maybe relate if you had a similar expectation, what that would do, how that jarred me, and it became an ambush. And a lot of times, not only if we have expectations of our spouse, but of ourselves, and we continue to disappoint ourselves, and maybe a role model that you think that you need to fulfill in being a wife or being a husband, and you continually set yourself up to be disappointed in that. Those are unrealistic expectations. We need to take that thought before the Lord and ask Him to help us to see those things that might have been in our heart, or might still be in our heart, that causes pain in our relationship, because they can do a damage that we're not aware of unless we're looking for that.
Okay. The next one is self-centeredness. I already kind of alluded to the reality that we've discovered that self-centeredness is one of the greatest enemies of successful marriage. Now, we don't typically look at that as something that's going to hurt us. We all feel somewhat self-entitled. We believe that there are certain things we deserve. Many of us make the mistake of even thinking we deserve to be happy. Like that's all that God cares about is our personal happiness. One author wrote a book, and the subtitle of the book is, "What if God expected marriage to be more about holiness than happiness?" And oftentimes we misunderstand what it is that God is really trying to do in us. It's not so much about what we need or want, but what we can give to another. That's the design of marriage. Self-centeredness and selfishness will destroy a relationship faster than anything else we've found. Many people think it's poor communication. I think that when there's poor communication, the root of it is that it's selfish. I'm only saying what I want, and I'm upset that you're not hearing me. If we can learn to identify how self-centeredness enters into our relationships and causes great damage, it'll do us great help. So we really want to identify that and help you to see that tonight. A story that I often tell is a young man that was at one of the men's conferences that I do, the Godly Masculinity Conference. A young man came to me after that and said, Tim, I really would like to meet with you afterwards. Can we just have a cup of coffee? And I said, sure. We went to a local restaurant. We sat down. Now, I just shared my story and told different things about our lives, and he was inspired by that and believed that there were some things that he needed to tell me about his own life. And so we talked, and he shared with me about what was going on in his home. He told me that 7 years previous to the day that I was sitting with him, he had gotten married to the love of his life. What he also told me as well was that he was having an affair with a woman at work at the same time. During the first 2 years of their marriage, he was involved in an adulterous affair. Even while his wife was giving birth to their firstborn child, he was involved with another woman. The affair became known. He confessed it. They were reconciled. Their marriage was restored. The wife was gracious and forgiving. She allowed him back into her heart. Their home was restored. They got integrated into the local church. They were even in ministry now at the time that I was sitting with him across from this table talking to him. So now we're several years later, and he's telling me how his marriage had been restored, how God had given them a ministry in their local church, and how wonderful things were. And yet at the same time, he told me that he was struggling with some things. He told me that he was really having a hard time with the fact that his wife had put on some extra pounds, and he really didn't like the way she looked. He didn't like the fact that she was extra heavy in some parts of her body that turned him off, he said. Now, again, he wasn't being rude or crude or cruel. He was simply being honest with me the best he knew how with what it was that he thought I would give him an answer to. Somehow he thought maybe I would validate that, or I would commend him for his honesty with his wife and telling her that he didn't like the way she looked. But he told me that this really bothered him, that he had asked her to go on a diet, that he had, graciously requested that perhaps she go get a gym membership, and she refused. And he was kind of upset about that, didn't understand why she would not do what he asked. While he's telling me this story, something overcame me. My heart began to grieve. I literally believe I was feeling what God was sensing and feeling, and I was feeling God's emotions about that moment. My heart was overwhelmed, and I began to even be a little broken. He saw the brokenness in my face. My countenance had changed. He said, "What's wrong?" I really didn't think he would want to hear what I was going to tell him, and I said, "It's all right, I'm sorry. You probably don't want to know." He goes, "No, Tim, I do want to know. That's why I asked you to come with me tonight. What are you thinking?" And I said, "You don't see it, do you? You don't see how ugly what you just told me really is. You don't see how ugly what it is that's in your heart, and the selfishness of your own heart that doesn't recognize that your wife forgave you of what some would consider an unforgivable sin. During the first years of marriage, when you're supposed to be enjoying the honeymoon, you're having an affair. While she's giving birth to your firstborn child, probably one of the factors that makes her not as shapely as you would like, she gave you your child, and you are sitting here across from me today saying you can't love her the way God wants you to love her because of a body feature that turned you off. Before I finished, and I'm sure I didn't say it quite the way I said it tonight, sitting in that restaurant, but I said it with conviction and I said it with anointing, and before I finished, he had tears in his eyes. And here's what he said: "Tim, I've never seen it that way before." You know, that's the scary thing about self-centeredness. We often don't see it for what it really is. He felt completely justified in what it was that he felt he needed from his wife. He didn't see how ugly it was, how selfish it was, how cruel it was. to demand this of his wife without loving her, without laying his life down for her sacrificially. He's told me several times since that day that one moment, those few minutes in that restaurant, changed his life and his marriage. Why? What changed that day? One thing. He saw the self-centeredness of his heart. Now, you might not be able to relate to that. Maybe you've never had a thought like he had. What I need you to do is I need you to listen to your own heart. What is it that you might have said or done that was selfish at its very core, that caused great pain in your spouse or in someone that you dearly love? Self-centeredness is a scary thing. And what the worst part of self-centeredness is, when we get to the point where Linda and I call it justified self-centeredness. When we get to a place where we really think that what we believe and feel and need is completely legitimate and expected, then we can often be greatly deceived. So I call you tonight to a place where you'll look into your heart to see if there's a possibility that this enemy of marriage called self-centeredness is actually bringing more destruction than you might be aware of.
Okay, the next ambush we want to identify is entitled Scripts from the Past. Scripts from the past. And what we mean by that are those messages that are written within our hearts from our past history. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're sad, but whatever they may be, they usually come from our family of origin, and it tells us how we should receive love, how we can expect to be loved, what we can expect in our home setting based on what you grew up seeing. Some of you came from a wonderful home, and so you anticipate, that is the script on your heart from your past. That's what you anticipate. You anticipate the roles being played out just like the ones you grew up with. Some of others don't have such a wonderful past. They come into a marriage having those scripts written on their heart about what they expect, how they think that they should be loved, how they deserve to be loved. Maybe that's positive, maybe that's a negative script. For Tim and I, we share at this point on Friday evening the scripts that we came into our marriage with. We both were raised in a wonderful, godly home. We love our families, very much have a lot of respect for them. But we recognize how they were very, very different. And because they were different, we came into our relationship I came expecting to be like my mom was, thinking Tim would be like my dad was. It's just, you don't know that. It's just kind of how you go into a relationship. Tim came in with the scripts from his past. Now, my home was very quiet, non-emotional. We weren't very affectionate, which, you know, I'm sorry to have to say that. I have learned how to be affectionate and enjoy that very much. But our home just wasn't that way. It had to do with my parents' background. Didn't mean we didn't love each other as much, but some of you can relate to that. My father was the head of our home, and there was no question about that. My mom was a typical pleaser personality, and that worked well with my dad. So all she had to do is please him, and that's what she did. And she found that her godly calling. And I looked to that as my role model and tried to, anyways, exemplify that in our home. Now that can be good. I mean, we are taught in Scripture to be submissive as wives, but there also has to be wisdom there and understanding. And God does expect us as women to be able to have opinions, to be able to share those in the marriage setting, because otherwise, how do we help each other become more like Christ? I mean, that is part of the process. That wasn't so much so in my childhood. I didn't see that role model. It was basically whatever my dad said, there was no discussion. That's just how we followed through. I didn't know any different. I didn't feel deprived at all. We had a wonderful family, and we were very close and still are. Tim grew up in a home where his dad was a lot more passive and quiet-natured. He's a very quiet-natured man, very godly, He's never, ever spoken an ill word about anybody, ever. We've never heard him be critical about anything, not even as generic as a waitress in a restaurant, nothing. He's just always very positive that way. So he's a godly man. He has a lot of strong character, but he wasn't very vocal in the home setting, if you can understand the picture I'm setting. His mother, Tim's mom, was much more dominant, much more opinionated, made a lot of the decisions. Of course, if it was ever something of a large nature and her husband disagreed, he would always be the leader. But in just the everyday things that would happen, it would appear that Tim's mom was a little more in charge. How's that? But what would happen, because his dad was of a quiet nature, he would allow the kids and his wife to kind of tease him in a way that over the years became disrespectful. I think now, as they look back on that, they would change that if they could. But a lot of times the things that happen in our home happen in a gradual way, and we kind of find ourselves in a place 10 years from where it started, and we realize, wow, this isn't where we intended to be. And it's kind of what happened in their home. As Tim grew up, he and his brother just got into the habit of really kind of razzing their dad and making fun of him. Sometimes he would just do things that just provoked that, and so they would do that. It got to where his mom got disrespectful in a way of his dad and allowed the boys to do the same thing. And what happened in that setting, Tim has realized now, he didn't realize this several years ago, but that he had written kind of like a vow in his heart. Nothing that it was a conscious thing, but in his heart he made up his mind that as a man, he recognized the pain that his father was probably experiencing because of the lack of respect that was there. And he made a vow that when he was an adult in his own home, and he was the head of that home, that would never happen to him. He would not stand for that to happen. Now, because as a child and a teenager that he wrote that vow, it was a little distorted in that Tim, as an adult then, began to interpret things as if they were challenging him and they were just merely conversation pieces. Like because I was trying to be like my mom, the pleaser, to the best of my knowledge anyways, I don't remember ever, being very strong and challenging him. But even if I got even close to a comment that was kind of negative, that maybe approached the subject that he needed to change something a little bit or how he did something, and I was far away from being critical. He would respond to that because of that vow he had written in his heart. He recognized that or thought it was criticism, disrespect, dishonor, and so he would react to that in a very strong way. Again, I was trying to be this pleaser like my mom in an unhealthy way, and I would back down, and so it got to where, because of those scripts that were in our past and written on our heart, it caused our relationship to become dysfunctional because we weren't communicating properly. So hopefully you can look upon your script. Yours might be totally different. I've had people come up to me in conferences and say, no, mine was exactly like yours. My dad was like that. My mom was like that. But sometimes they can't relate exactly to it. But you can look back in your own home and realize, okay, that's how I came into our relationship. Is there anything in that that's causing us stress now in our relationship? Is that set up as an ambush? And only you can go to the Lord and ask Him to help you work through that and see if that's an ambush for your marriage.
It's important to understand that we didn't choose these ambushes simply because they were situations we went through. In our counseling and in our ministry over the last several years, we've talked with lots of couples, and there are common denominators here that all of us deal with. This last one that we're going to be looking at, this last ambush, is certainly one that we as believers understand is very significant, and that is simply called satanic assault. I said earlier in jest that there is a very real enemy, and it's not your spouse. We do have an enemy of marriage. And I don't think that that is just for Christian marriages. I believe that marriage, the institution that God initiated, Satan understands how real that is, how special that is to the heart of God. And every time that he can destroy a marriage, I kind of visualize it like a slap in God's face. And we need to understand that there is a very real enemy of marriage, and all of us are dealing with that satanic assault on one level or another. And if we can come to grips with how that is expressed, how that's lived out in our lives, what is it that's going on? Have you stopped and thought about it? Have you as a couple considered what it is that might be happening to you? That's what we want you to do in just a few minutes. We're going to have a couple huddle. We're going to have you just kind of break into couples and just find a place that's kind of quiet for you to be able to ask some questions and look at some things that are in your workbook. Find out what ambushes are coming against you. Those that might be listening on videotape or on DVD or on CD, we want you to do this homework as well. We want you to go and find a quiet place and ask these questions as well. But the last and certainly not least ambush is satanic assault. Linda and I had quite a few things. We planted the church here in Temecula. Within just a few short months, I found that I was having severe back problems. In our first building program here in the church, we were in the process of tearing down walls and doing some very exciting things as we moved from a small living room where we started our church. We moved into a storefront, and from the storefront we moved into a 10,000 square foot office building, turned that office building into a church with a sanctuary and classrooms and offices. I mean, we couldn't be more happy to watch the progression of this new church plant move the way it was. But yet we found that shortly thereafter we were experiencing some very real spiritual warfare in our lives, in our home, against us and what God had called us to do, not only in our ministry, but also in our personal lives. In the midst of the building program, I found that I had ruptured one of my discs and I had severe back problems for quite a few years. Ended up having surgery a short time after that. Well, one thing leads to the next, and we find ourselves in the midst of expanding once again. And Linda had a vision to initiate a Christian academy, really the first church in the Temecula Valley to have a Christian school. It was her vision based on our own passion for our children and what we wanted for them. And so she started from scratch, this brand new Christian institution in this valley. And shortly thereafter, after we had really gotten it going, we had about 150 students. Linda found out that she was pregnant with what we thought was going to be our third child. Turned out to be an abnormal pregnancy, and we lost that child. It was a molar pregnancy, which we found out causes the placenta to grow like a cancerous tumor. So although it was removed several times, it grew back again, and the only way that it could stop growing would be to go through chemotherapy. So Linda had to go through 52 chemotherapy treatments to eradicate this thing that was supposed to bring life, was trying to take hers. But we knew that God was with us, not against us. He was for us, not against us. We knew that He was going to see us through, but it was an ambush nonetheless. It was a satanic assault to try to take us down and to mess up what God was doing, but we believed that He was going to see us through. And He completely healed her body, never to be thought of again. However, because of that, we ended up ultimately having to close the academy because other institutions began and they had lots more to offer, and we were struggling with Linda not being at the helm any longer, and so we had to close the school. It was devastating, heartbreaking for us. A death of a vision that we didn't understand. Why would God have us start that only to lose it? Why did we think we were going to have a baby only to not be able to hold it in our arms? These are the kind of things that all of us go through that can devastate us. And with God's help, we will be able to make it through those, but we have to see them for what they are. They are the enemy's ways to try to undo us, to try to get our eyes off of Jesus, off of our home and marriage, and onto our troubles. And if we allow that to happen, it can be very devastating. We went from there to a point where I went on a missions trip to Peru. Some folks in this room were actually with me. when we went on that missions trip. I was baptizing people in the Amazon River. The last day of our trip there, 2-week trip to Peru, we were building a school in one of the most poverty-stricken areas of that community. Downriver, there were natives that heard that there were some American preachers in town and wanted us to baptize them. And so we got in a boat and they took us upriver, and I had the privilege of being able to get into that Amazon River and baptize natives who had accepted Jesus Christ as their personal Lord and Savior. It was a very exciting and memorable time, but while I was standing in that germ-infested, virus-infested water, didn't think about it at the time, didn't really care. I thought I could do anything. And yet, what I didn't know was that so much of the runoff that came from these squatters that lived on the riverbank was all infecting these waters. Most of the people that lived in those areas had diseases that were going to take their lives rather quickly. Well, while I was in that Amazon River, something bit me. Some kind of fish or something caused a bite on the back of my leg. I felt it. Everybody saw me react to it. And what I didn't realize was that a couple days on the way home, by the time we got back to Miami, I was very sick. Had to be put into the hospital for 3 days. There was a virus that they knew got into my system. They didn't know which one it was or how to deal with it. They had to call the CDC to find the right antibiotic to give me to destroy this virus that had found its way into my body. They found it, eradicated that virus, but what they didn't know was that at the same time of that infection, there was another virus that found its way into my liver, known as hepatitis C. 3 years later, we were getting ready for the expansion of our church. It was a very exciting time. We were in a stewardship campaign, raising tens of thousands of dollars to be able to buy property and to move to the next level of what God had called us to in our church. I'll never forget, I was standing on the property right down here on the 15 freeway off of Clinton Keith Road. And I was standing on that property, literally signing the papers to buy the property that day when my phone rang and my doctor called me as a result of doing some blood work, and he said, "Tim, I have bad news for you. You have hepatitis C." It was there, standing on that property, signing the paper after all that we had done to get to that point. I couldn't have been more excited that day to stand on those 16 acres and realize where God had brought us. And the enemy tried to destroy and ruin that special day that I was supposed to enjoy. Well, long story short, I ended up having to go through an interferon treatment that's a chemotherapy type treatment that was devastating to me. And that's what Pastor Evie was alluding to earlier, how I was very, very sick. We'll tell you more about that story after we come back from our break and as we go into the second half of sharing some of the things that happened. But that's the setup of where we were. What was happening to us, the ambushes, the fight that we were fighting, desiring to plant a church, to have a good, strong home and marriage. And yet, in the midst of all of that, there were things working against us that at that time we didn't understand. We didn't see them for what they were. And that's why we're here tonight, to bring an alert to you, to raise the flags and to tell you that there are some things that are going on in your lives that we want you to be aware of so that you can leave here tonight informed, transparent, realizing that there are some things that are working against you, ambushing you and your marriage and your home and your ministry and your future. But there's a God who loves you and cares for you, and He's working on your behalf. Tonight is a night of wisdom, a night of information, a time of motivation for you to be able to say, what's working against us? What are we not seeing? What am I blaming on you that I should be blaming on our real enemy? So that we can move into the place that God really wants for us. On page 4 in your workbooks, you'll see the couple huddle. Right above that in your workbooks, there's a verse, Matthew 24, verse 12. And it says, "Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. But he who stands firm to the end will be saved." Now, I know that's about our eternal reward. I know that is about our salvation, but I also believe it is about our lives. It's about our marriage. It's about standing firm to the end, not giving up because it's rough or hard or difficult, because we're being ambushed or the enemy is trying to attack our home or our ministry or marriage. But it's about standing firm. The love of most will grow cold. but it doesn't have to. Tonight, we can make an affirmation of the value of marriage and of our commitment to it, no matter what we're going through, no matter what has happened to us, to say like Job, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. And apply that kind of commitment and covenant and purpose to our marriages so that we can be all that God wants us to be. If you would just take a few minutes, and we'll be allowing you to disperse and just have a little bit of time together, but I want you to just go over what we've talked about. Talk about the ambushes that might be presently happening in your marriage, in your life. Maybe things are kind of calm right now, and you just need to look over what you've been through so you could say, wow, we really have fought the good fight. We're here tonight because of the goodness of God. We've made it a long way. Whatever it is you need to do, if you're dealing with some issues, talk about them. Realize what these things might be doing to your home, your marriage, your life right now. Forgive each other. Give each other the freedom to realize that they don't want it any more than you do. Just talk about it. Identify what might be happening, what you could do, and what you'd like to see happen as a result of this weekend together so you can have all the